Hello, I'm Alison Hargreaves from guidesforbrides.co.uk and as promised this evening we are talking about the postponement dilemma. And it is completely natural that it's something that a lot of couples are concerned about. We're in the depths of a lockdown and it's really hard at the moment to see beyond that. It's not a topic we usually discuss. It's not really what we're about. We at Guides for Brides have been very much about trying to find the solutions and trying to find ways to help make weddings happen and help all those couples really keen to go ahead in whatever way they can to be able to do that. But it did seem quite important to just address the question of postponements because there are a lot of miscommunications and misinformation out there, and if there is one thing that I feel we can help with, it's just setting some of those straight so that you as a couple have all of the information that you might need in order to reassure yourself or to help make that decision. So the important thing to start by saying is that nobody knows what is going to happen. No one knows at the moment when weddings will be able to restart and what those weddings will look like or how long we're going to be in this situation. Is it something that we're going to be living with for years? Nobody knows at the moment. We've got to be realistic. We would love to have that government roadmap that says from this date weddings are going to be happening. The task force are asking for more of an indication and are asking for government to work with the task force so that we can have sensible solutions and looking at things like what a minimum viable wedding might look like. We know from your point of view it's not just about the numbers, and we're fighting your corner for that. But we've got to be realistic about the situation, and we have to appreciate that the government are not going to give us months and months of notice of what's going to happen because they're dealing with an ever-changing situation, and so their policies will need to change as well. And we would certainly much rather have that slight uncertainty than be absolutely all guns blazing going for a particular date and then things suddenly change, as we've seen in other industries. So what will be helpful, first of all, is to dispel some of the misinformation that might be preventing you from feeling you can go ahead with your plans. That will be very easy to dispel that so that you can relax a little bit and hopefully go forward with your plans. One of the ones that we've had a lot of chat on Facebook over the last 24 hours on is concerns that it might be a requirement that you have to be vaccinated in order to attend a wedding. We cannot see that happening. I know that's really worrying. Some of you who are planning a family, I don't want to get into the vaccination debate here. This isn't the right forum for it, but concerns that if you hadn't had the vaccine, would you still be able to attend your wedding? We cannot see that is possibly going to be a criteria for guests attending weddings. There are lots of medical reasons that it's not appropriate for some people not to have the vaccine. I would also counter that with just bearing in mind the fact that obviously the more people that are vaccinated at a wedding, the safer it's going to be for those that can't be vaccinated for some reason. So bear that in mind for your guest numbers. There's obviously also the logic there that the typical age of those getting married, there are a lot of couples in their 20s and 30s, they're going to be the last to be vaccinated. We can't wait until then for weddings to take place. So if that is a concern, please put that one out of your mind. The next concern is that your guests might not enjoy the wedding in whatever format it is. I think at the moment everyone would love to be out doing whatever they can do. You know, socially distant meals, freezing cold in December for those that could get out and eat out under patio heaters was suddenly appealing. When else would that happen? So guests will enjoy whatever it is that you put on. Some couples feel that it won't feel like a proper wedding to them. It absolutely will. All those that have gone ahead with their weddings over the last few months will tell you how fabulous it was. it will be different if you're going ahead with number restrictions or any other restrictions. It will be different. I'm not saying you will be going ahead with any restrictions, but if you choose to go ahead with an early wedding and that's what you're looking at, you will still enjoy it. Remember what your wedding is about. It's also about the fact the two of you are making a commitment to each other in front of, hopefully, all of your family and friends. The other thing that seems to be influencing quite a lot of people are the other opinions that they're reading online about postponement. And what we have noticed, because obviously we have the sort of private communications as well as seeing what's happening online, is that those who have committed to going ahead tend to keep very quiet about it online. They're tending to private message us, not saying anything in forums. I think possibly because they're nervous that other people might put them off or say, why are you going ahead? And I'm not sure about that as an idea, and so on. Whereas on the flip side, those that are choosing to postpone, quite naturally, they've had to make a really, really difficult decision, probably quite sad to have made that decision, and they're reaching out to the online community to ask for that support. So this is why we're seeing more talk about I'm postponing than no, I'm comfortable, I'm going ahead with my plans. So make sure you're not pressured, make sure it's your decision if you do go that way, based on fact. And the last little myth to dispel is concern that the paperwork won't be in place in time. We know in some registration districts the registrars are needing to prioritise sadly dealing with deaths and birth registrations, and they're not at the moment prioritising weddings, but that's because weddings aren't happening. So if you're in that area, it is purely because there is no need to prioritise you giving notice at the moment. When we are 28 days from weddings restarting, that is going to be a sign. You'll see the registrars are all really kicking into action, and they will know who they need to get through quickly, who's got a wedding coming up. So hopefully, having dispelled some myths, it will enable more people to feel comfortable with their plans of going ahead. But why would you be thinking possibly about a postponement? And I would say there are two overriding reasons that we're looking at. Number one, if you absolutely know that the day that you know it's going to be is not going to be possible, then that is understandable that you'll want to postpone. And we're seeing this more so with those with a lot of family coming from overseas. So, if most of your family are in Australia, for example, and your wedding is in April or May, you can be pretty confident they can't be there. Those sort of situations, if you it needs to be a big wedding, your culture, your faith is dictating the number of people that need to be at your wedding, and you really don't feel that that's likely to be happening, again, another good reason. And the other one that is quite important just to think about is if the idea of carrying on with the current uncertainty, and I'm not saying that the situation is going to get any less uncertain in the future, if you are just too anxious in the current situation, you have to put your own mental health first. You have to look after yourself. So that would be another reason that you might say, do you know what, just not now. Let's wait until we've got some more certainty and I can relax a little bit. Those reasons have to be strong enough that you are not going to mind the costs that will almost inevitably be involved in making that decision to postpone. So you may be asking why there would be costs involved in postponing. And if the postponement is done at an appropriate time for appropriate reasons, carefully timed, carefully managed, with flexibility and taking all of your suppliers with you, then it's not necessarily going to cost anything at all. It may be as simple as just moving the date. But if the date isn't frustrated, so if you're choosing to postpone your wedding, if you're looking for like, you've already held one date, and if you're wanting now to take another valuable date in that venue and from those suppliers, there might be increased costs. And if you don't take your suppliers with you, again, that is the sort of thing that starts to have financial implications. So I think it's useful just to look in those in a little bit more detail. And I'll stress at this point, I am not a solicitor. I'm not going to go into depth on the legal situation. I can look at it from what, to me, feels right and feels wrong. We all have a different moral compass on this, but I like to feel that at Guides for Brides we sit right in between venues, suppliers and couples. We're right in the middle of that, and we hear it from all the sides, and we can see what would appear to be fair, would appear to be the right approach. So this guidance is very much based on that, not on legal advice. This is on my own opinion. So first of all, as I mentioned, if the date is not frustrated, and we're seeing a lot of this, people panicking with weddings, way off in the future. Now there have been, there's a press release has now come out from the UK Weddings Task Force that refers to the conversations that they are hoping to have with government regarding a roadmap, and the fact it's very much in line with Boris Johnson's suggestions of weddings being from Easter onwards. So we're looking at those sort of timescales. The task force has made it very, very clear that for weddings to be viable for couples and for venues, they need to be with at least 50 guests, and they also have to have other activities involved in that. So a wedding isn't just a sit-down meal. That was fine in the short term, but we need to be working towards a proper viable wedding, and how do we establish that? And we know from the survey that we did, thank you to all of you that had responded to that, it was really good to have such a huge data set, that the music and the dancing is very important. So when asked, would you prefer 100 guests for a banquet style wedding, just the meal, or 50 guests but with the music and dancing, only 20% went for the banquet style. We understand 80% of couples, for you, the wedding involves that music and dancing as well. So this isn't just about the numbers. So what makes the wedding frustrated? It is going to become frustrated if it is clear that you cannot have the wedding, the contract can't be delivered as agreed. So at the moment during lockdown, for the period that is covered by lockdown, clearly those weddings can't go ahead. But beyond that, we don't know the situation yet. And even though, I must stress, even though the task force are keen to propose that we're looking at April onwards with the government, that does not mean that anything before that is automatically frustrated. This is what they're proposing. It is absolutely not what government has said might happen. So we don't know what is frustrated. And if it's not frustrated, then the normal terms and conditions will apply unless they're deemed to be unfair. So bear that in mind. This is particularly important if you are cancelling a date later on in the year that otherwise could have been used by another bride and groom or another couple, but you have held that date for a long time. Let's say it was a September date. A lot of people were wanting September dates. The moment has passed now. Those couples will now have booked for next year. It's too late to resell that couple, that date to another couple. So you will be holding that valuable asset. So when you're cancelling, you need to remember that that is what you're cancelling. It is a valuable asset. For example, there will be stock that the supplier will have got in, knowing that your wedding is in March, April, May, for example, and that stock is not going to still be in date later on in the year if you've postponed to later on. So all of these things, they just all start stacking up as costs, and it's perfectly reasonable for the supplier if they are going to incur that cost for that to be charged, particularly if this is under terms and conditions rather than a frustrated contract. But if it is a frustrated contract, and again, another misconception, I keep seeing the words, we'd expect a full refund. Please, 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 wherever that is coming from, please go and If you feel it's coming from CMA guidance, please go and read the guidance. The most recent guidance is from the end of September. It's ever so easy to find. We will be doing more about it online, but it does not say full refund without any caveats. It is less costs that have been incurred, and what is alarming and surprising, I think, to many couples is understanding what those costs are. We have done a study of suppliers, and we've spoken to a lot of venues about what typically would have been incurred in the way of costs 8 weeks before a wedding. It is a huge amount of the cost has been incurred at that point. So if you are postponing and thinking there's going to be no costs involved because it's frustrated, then just bear that in mind as well. So please read that guidance and do it before you pick up the phone, because it does damage the relationship with your venue or your suppliers if you go in blindly with, am I entitled to a full refund? So the first thing I would do if you're looking at is it frustrated or not, is speak to your venue. They are going to know more than you would about what they can go ahead with and under which circumstances. So speak to your venue. They are your ally in this. They will want it to work if it can, but if it can't, they will be the first to tell you. They're not going to want your wedding to go ahead if it's not the right thing to do. Take their guidance. They will be able to advise you on options like whether a like-for-like date is going to cost more, because their prices naturally go up year on year. They will be able to let you know how to, if that is important to you, they'll be able to help you keep costs down. But equally, we're hearing just as many stories of couples who actually are now in a position, they've had an extra year to save up and they're wanting to change it from a single day to a 2-day wedding. So renegotiating on that, working out a way to make that work is all a really important part of it. My next bit of advice is take your suppliers with you. So speak to them before you decide on the on whether or not you're going to be postponing, and more importantly, on the date that you'll be postponing to. A lot of suppliers get very, very booked up a long time in advance. And we know again from the survey that your photographer, your celebrant, your planner, you want to take them all with you. And the implications again on costs if you don't check with them, if they can't move with you, is that you have cancelled them and their terms and conditions will apply. So that will incur again cost, and it's unnecessary. It's just not needed. With a little bit of work, and we have spoken to venues and asked them to help you with this as well, finding dates that work for everyone. So my hope is that you will have the confidence to go ahead. You'll have the confidence to hold off. You'll wait until 8 weeks, ideally before the wedding, so we have a little bit more of an idea. I don't think any of your guests will be expecting you to make a decision earlier than that. So try to wait until 8 weeks before the wedding, if at all possible. For so many of you, that will really give you an idea of what's possible, because what we know is mid-February we'll have a very good idea as to what the next few months will look like. And if we are looking at opening up, as we imagine we will be at the beginning of April, then those with weddings in June will be able to see what that looks like, and you can make an informed decision. And that's what we're all about. It's having those facts and making those informed decisions. So if you're going ahead, go ahead with that flexible attitude. We have been so impressed at just how flexible everyone is. The number of couples that have said they'll go ahead with 50 guests, they'll go ahead with 30 guests. I think we're all pushing for 50 guests, and I think it means the very, very high majority of weddings will then still be able to go ahead. We're looking at about 84%, we believe, for May will go ahead if it's 50 guests. So communicate with your venue, communicate with your suppliers, talk to them about the costs and the risks of going ahead. So particularly if we're still in a tier system, whether there is a chance that you're going to be moving between tiers and your wedding might not be able to take place as planned. And the other little bit that would be really, really worth talking to your venue about before you make the decision to go ahead with restrictions is check what the costs might be. We were really, really alarmed to read in our survey how many people felt that a pro rata reduction in price was appropriate, particularly where it's hire only venues. So this is the situation where if you had booked for 100 guests to come to your wedding, a huge number of people felt that if only 50 were allowed, they should only be paying 50% of the bill. Now, when the venue and the caterers worked out the price for 100, they were working it out on the basis of scale, and it's that scale that brings the price down and makes it affordable. So it's just not possible. It would not be financially viable for most venues to be able to do that. So have that conversation. What was much greater concern is a very large number of couples felt that with hire only facilities that the price would decrease. So again, half the number of guests you would pay half price, quarter of the number of guests you would pay quarter. It doesn't make logical sense, certainly to me. The CMA may disagree with me on that one, but it doesn't make logical sense, and more importantly, it wouldn't be worth the venue going ahead with that, because not only are their costs exactly the same regardless of how many guests you have, they're actually losing income, because generally they would be getting an income from the bar or a commission from the caterer or possibly even other suppliers on that venue hire. So bear that in mind, and as I say, it goes back to communication. Speak to your venue and find out the situation on that. I think overall the message I would like to get across is, because nobody knows the right approach on postponements, it's a different approach is important for every venue, every supplier and every couple. This is where it's really important just to be kind, to be compassionate. We know how hard it is on you as a couple planning your dream wedding day that COVID happened. But it's also absolutely devastating on those businesses that are there to try and help and support you and want to create your dream wedding. So please bear that in mind. Some of them are really, really suffering from very significant anxiety. They're terrified to open their emails in the morning or pick up the phone, because they're worried they're going to have an upset couple at the other end. They're trying their best to help. But they are in this situation alongside you. And I think that really perhaps brings me to my final point. They are there alongside you. This is all about teamwork now. You chose that venue and you chose those suppliers because you trusted them to create a fantastic day for you. We can see that while we're living in the shadow of COVID for the time being, we're going to have to rethink plans a little bit. We may need to recreate that day that we dreamed about, but let's go back to that original team, that team that were originally making that dream come true. Let them help you again, and that really is going to be the secret to getting the day that you're looking for. I hope that's been helpful tonight. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining.